4th century BC, Athens. A man walks beneath the trees of the Lyceum. Students follow as he moves. He stops, gestures toward a plant, asks a question, then walks on again. Thought, for him, is not delivered from a podium. It is tested in motion. There is no army behind him, no crown on his head, no prophecy carved into his birth, and yet almost everything that will govern how future civilizations think about nature, politics, ethics, science will pass through his mind. He will not conquer cities, he will catalog them, he will not burn empires, he will explain why they rise and why they fall. His name is Aristotle, and the world is about to be taught how to think, slowly, carefully, and forever. This is mini history. Before Aristotle, knowledge meant inheritance. Truth was passed down through myth, poetry, and authority. The gods caused storms. Fate shaped lives. The universe was something to interpret, not investigate. Even philosophy leaned upward, away from the earth. Plato, the towering mind of Athens, believed truth lived beyond the physical world, in perfect, invisible forms, more real than the objects casting their shadows below. The senses, Plato taught, deceived. Aristotle listened. Then he looked at animals, at plants, at human behavior. He began to suspect something quietly revolutionary. The truth was not hidden above the world, but embedded within it. To understand reality, one did not need revelation. One needed attention. This single shift from explanation to observation would change everything that followed. Aristotle arrived in Athens as a teenager and remained for nearly 20 years. He studied at Plato's academy, surrounded by men who debated perfection, ideals, and eternal truths. He absorbed it all and slowly diverged. Plato asked, "What is real beyond the senses?" Aristotle asked, "What causes things to be as they are?" Plato searched for truth beyond the world. Aristotle searched for it within the world itself. The disagreement was not hostile, but fundamental. When Plato died, Aristotle did not inherit the academy. Instead, he left Athens, not in rejection, but in independence. The student had outgrown the master. And with that quiet departure, Western thought split into two enduring paths, one chasing ideal truth, the other studying lived reality. Aristotle turned his attention outward. He walked coastlines, dissected animals, studied plants, and recorded behaviors with relentless care. He classified fish by anatomy, observed octopuses change color, tracked how embryos developed stage by stage. This was not idle curiosity. Aristotle believed knowledge had structure, and that structure could be discovered. He wrote not in riddles, but in categories, not in myths, but in lists. For the first time, biology became a discipline. Nature became something to map. He was wrong about many details, but right about the method. Look first, record carefully, draw conclusions last. It was a quiet revolution, and it taught the world a dangerous idea, that truth could be found without gods, prophecy, or conquest, simply by paying attention. Aristotle believed thought itself could be examined, not inspiration, not rhetoric, but reasoning, broken into parts, tested and understood. He identified patterns beneath argument, premises, conclusions, contradictions. From this came the syllogism, a foundational form of logical thinking, the first formal structure of deductive reasoning, a way to determine whether a conclusion must follow from what came before it. With this, Aristotle did something no one had done before. He turned reasoning itself into a discipline. For nearly 2,000 years, all Western logic would operate inside the framework he described. Logic was no longer instinct or persuasion. It was a system, one that could be taught, tested, and corrected. Aristotle had not told the world what to think. He had taught it how. Aristotle rejected the idea that morality came from commands. Virtue, he argued, was not obedience to divine law. It was habit, a quality shaped by repetition. Courage was not fearlessness. It was the balance between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity stood between greed and waste. Wisdom grew through practice, not revelation. To live well was to train character, just as athletes trained the body. Goodness was something you did repeatedly, not something you declared. Happiness, eudaimonia, was not pleasure or wealth, but a life lived in accordance with reason over time. This was ethics for citizens, not saints. By removing morality from the heavens, Aristotle placed responsibility firmly in human hands. If people failed, they could not blame fate. Aristotle studied cities the way he studied animals. He collected constitutions, compared laws, and observed how people actually behaved, not how they claimed they should. No state, he argued, existed for glory alone. Its purpose was to cultivate good citizens capable of reason. He classified governments by who ruled, one, few, or many, and how power was used. Each form could produce justice. Each could decay into corruption, tyranny, oligarchy, democracy. None were sacred. The best system was not perfect, but balanced, stable enough to endure, flexible enough to adapt. Politics, in Aristotle's view, was not ideology. It was engineering. Societies were systems. Systems could be studied, and studied systems could be improved. In 343 BC, Aristotle was summoned north to Macedonia. His student was 13 years old, restless, brilliant, already dangerous. His name was Alexander III of Macedon, later known to history as Alexander the Great. Aristotle taught him poetry, medicine, ethics, and philosophy. He placed Homer's Iliad in the boy's hands, a story of glory, wrath, and consequence. He taught Alexander to admire greatness and to question it, to seek excellence, but understand its cost. What Alexander became was not Aristotle's design, but how Alexander thought bore his teacher's imprint. One would shape the world with armies, the other would shape the minds that tried to understand it. Between them, the ancient world would never think the same way again. When Aristotle returned to Athens, he did not seek power. He founded a school. The Lyceum was not a temple of wisdom or a place of reverence, it was a workshop. Students walked as they learned. Questions were recorded, revised, discarded. Knowledge was cumulative. Something built together, not revealed. Aristotle and his students collected constitutions from across Greece. They mapped animals and plants. They debated ethics, poetry, physics, astronomy. Nothing was too small to matter. This was a new idea, that learning should be institutional, systematic, and open-ended. Not a lineage, not a mystery cult, an engine of inquiry. For the first time, knowledge was treated not as inheritance, but as a project that could outlive its founder. In 323 BC, Alexander died in Babylon. The shock rippled west. In Athens, old resentments resurfaced. Macedonian influence became dangerous to admit. Aristotle was accused of impiety, the same charge that had condemned Socrates a generation earlier. This time, the philosopher refused martyrdom. "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy," he is said to have remarked. He fled the city and took refuge in Chalcis. There were no chains, no guards, but exile is exile all the same. The man who had taught the world how to think was driven away by fear of thought itself. Aristotle died the following year, in 322 BC. His school endured briefly, then faded. His works nearly vanished. Centuries later, Aristotle survived by accident and translation. Islamic scholars preserved and expanded his writings. Medieval thinkers rediscovered them through Arabic texts. Universities rebuilt themselves around his logic. ethics, and natural philosophy. For nearly 2,000 years, to think rigorously in the West meant thinking with Aristotle. Empires collapsed, religions rose, borders shifted, and still his framework remained. Not because it demanded belief, but because it rewarded understanding. Today, Aristotle is rarely called revolutionary. He did not found a movement. He did something more enduring. He taught humanity to slow down, to observe, to classify, to reason. Where conquerors changed borders, Aristotle changed habits of mind. Alexander ruled the world for a moment. Aristotle ruled how the world explained itself. Power fades, methods endure, the armies are gone, the questions remain. And every time we ask why, how, or what, we are still walking beneath the trees of the Lyceum.